the grid to their grid positions at the start of the Grand Prix, as less than a sector had been completed before the red flag flew. However, at the second time of asking, Carlos managed to hold off Max Verstappen, whilst Ferrari teammate Leclerc and Red Bull's Perez tried to make it 4 wide going into turn 4, the two of them making contact, and Perez being made to pit on lap 6 due to the damage accrued by this incident. This left Carlos Sainz in the lead ahead of Verstappen and Leclerc, the Monegasque also having picked up damage to his front wing, as well as Sergio Perez dropping all the way down to 17th by the end of lap 6. But Sainz would make his first mistake of the day on lap 10, getting a snap of oversteer at Chapel and going off the track, letting Max Verstappen into the lead. But it would swing back to Carlos once again merely 2 laps later, as the Dutchman received a puncture due to a piece of carbon fibre on the track, forcing him to pit and coming out in 8th. Now, I am not a huge fan of Max's, to say the least, so I was absolutely ecstatic when I saw him slowing, and it would go from bad to worse for Max on lap 14, as it was confirmed that he had an issue with the bodywork on the rear of his car. Sainz was the first of the front runners to pit, excluding Verstappen of course, on lap 20. And Verstappen came onto the box again on lap 24, being swiftly passed by Sebastian Vettel on the pit exit, before Charles Leclerc also pitted a lap later, promoting Lewis into the lead. Hamilton has won a race in every year in his F1 career, and this could have been his opportunity to do so once again. Team orders came into play on lap 31 as Carlos Sainz was asked to make way for Leclerc, promoting him to second, the Spaniard not achieving the lap times that Ferrari was looking for. Lewis Hamilton pitted on lap 34, his hard work out on track undone by a poor 4.3 second pit stop, leaving him in third. Meanwhile, Verstappen had been tussling for P8 with Esteban Ocon, losing the possession to the Frenchman before the Alpine driver pulled over before Copse, retiring from the race and bringing out the safety car, under which Carlos Sainz, Lewis Hamilton and Sergio Perez, who had made his way up to 4th by this point, pitted. However, Charles Leclerc decided to stay out on older, harder rubber. Despite the handicap, Charles led from the safety car restart with a phenomenal tussle between Hamilton and Perez brewing behind, the Mexican making it work around the outside on Lewis. But as soon as I thought that P1 was safe in poor Charles Leclerc's hands, he went wide at Luffield, and Carlos Sainz snuck into the lead on the inside, as Verstappen moved up into 8th on Magnussen further back. And the almighty battle at the front would only continue on lap 45 as Sergio Perez tried to overtake Leclerc around the outside at Stowe, this battle continuing up to the final corner. Lewis Hamilton going through on the inside of both of them at club to take P2, but only a few corners later, Lewis Hamilton was forced off the track by Perez, letting back both himself and Leclerc once more. It was scintillating to watch. But Hamilton was back up into the podium places once more on lap 48 at Luffield, going around the outside of Charles Leclerc for P3, before Leclerc switched back at Copse and Lewis finally made the move stick at Stowe. So Sergio Perez would finish behind Carlos Sainz, reducing the deficit between himself and Max Verstappen in the championship to merely 34 points. Ahead of Lewis Hamilton, who would take his second podium in a row in the Mercedes, his 13th in Britain, and Charles Leclerc, who botched the strategy once again in the Ferrari, for some reason choosing to stay out on his old hards. I have no idea why Ferrari wanted to do that. Instead of boxing under the safety car, he ended up 4th. Ferrari really needs to sort out their strategy team, because this could have been a key race victory in the championship fight, as Max only ended up with 7th due to that puncture, but once again, Ferrari did not deliver on the day. I feel like we're saying that all too much as of late. In fifth place was Fernando Alonso, who benefited from the Verstappen puncture to move up to sixth in the early stages from his starting position of P7. And he went on to make the top 5 after Norris pitted on lap 35 to block off Fernando's undercut attempt and was then forced to pit again under the safety car, coming out in 6th, where the British driver would remain. Norris did, however, have a good start to the Grand Prix, making the overtake work on Hamilton for P5 in the opening stages before the Mercedes driver struck back on lap 6 at Brooklands. P6 for Norris is his best finish since Monaco, and means that he is now 14 points ahead of Valtteri Bottas in the drivers' standings, as the Finn retired on lap 21. The double DNF for Alfa Romeo is their first since last year's season finale. Max Verstappen was in P7, but it could well have been 8th for the Dutchman, as he engaged in an almighty scrap with Mick Schumacher in the Haas, which almost culminated in a huge collision at the final corner, but both finished the race unscathed, Mick taking his first ever points finish in Formula 1, and his teammate K-Mag snatching 10th as well. This is Haas's first double points finish since Germany 2019, that was when Rich Energy was still on the car, and means that they are now only 7 points behind 7th place AlphaTauri in the constructors' standings. Despite being aided by the 6 retirements in this Grand Prix, this was an excellent recovery drive for both after a dismal qualifying, and could be a turning point for Haas this season. Now, they just need to sort out their reliability. Sebastian Vettel also took some surprise points today, his teammate Stroll in 11th, taking Aston Martin's tally to 18 this year, which is only 2 points behind Haas, as well as moving Seb past Daniel Ricciardo in the drivers' standings. Nicholas Latifi was 12th, his best result of the year, but there was certainly a missed opportunity for the Canadian driver, as Latifi ran in the points for the majority of the race, being swallowed up by the midfield, which consisted of Esteban Ocon, the Haas drivers, and the Aston Martins in the stages prior to the final safety car. Daniel Ricciardo was 13th, the Aussie having yet another sour weekend. He would have been lapped by the majority of the field had it not been for that late safety car, and never looked in control after his poor qualifying on Saturday. AlphaTauri also struggled hugely on Sunday, as both drivers became entangled in first lap incidents, and the two of them came together on lap 10 at turn 3. Yuki Tsunoda receiving a 5-second time penalty for his troubles, being accused of causing a collision and ending up the last of the finishers. Gasly was also given the black and orange flag on lap 26, leading to his retirement from the Grand Prix. What a race that was. It had absolutely everything. A massive first lap incident, a frantic mistake-filled battle for the lead, and some of the most enticing racing that I have ever witnessed in the closing stages for the podium places. But the question remains, who is my driver of the day? Well, for his first points in Formula 1, it is Mick Schumacher. After a pretty desultory qualifying for him and his teammate K-Mag in 19th, the German bounced back, carving his way through the remaining midfield runners in the closing stages and nearly snagging 7th from Max Verstappen in the dying embers. After the difficulties Mick has had this year at Haas, including that massive crash at Monaco, Gunther Steiner saying that he needs to fix up his attitude, he needs to change something about his racing. This is truly great news for the youngster. Now for my team of the weekend, and despite Haas definitely being a big contender for this, I'm actually going for Alpine. Fernando Alonso had a decent qualifying and moved into the top 5 after Lando Norris's safety car stop. P5 the team's best result all year. And he was fighting up at the front in the closing stages as well, showing the pace of the Alpine and that on its day, the car can really challenge at the helm of the midfield. Despite Esteban Ocon retiring with a fuel pump issue, his racing up to that point had been sublime. He, like Schumacher, had qualified poorly, in 15th, but made up for it with some confident passing moves after the red flag restart, past both Haas drivers, and he then dispatched Latifi and Verstappen and looked to be catching up to the then 7th place Vettel before his car died. The end result may not have been satisfactory, but this was a great weekend for Alpine, and if they continue on this form, they may be sparring with McLaren for 4th in the Constructors' Championship in Austria next week. Finally, for my struggle of the day, and it is Yuki Tsunoda. He qualified 13th, unable to make it out of the damp Q2 session, and was caught up in the initial incidents, losing his front wing and limping back to the pits. From here, things only got worse, as he committed the cardinal sin of our sport, crashing into his teammate on lap 10, sending the Frenchman out of the Grand Prix, and resulting in him receiving a 5-second time penalty for causing a collision. He ended up last of the finishers. Yuki has hit a rough patch as of late, having crashed on the pit exit last weekend, a few weekends ago actually, in Canada, and not having scored any points since Spain. So he now really needs to make a change if he wants to retain his AlphaTauri seat for the foreseeable future. Thank you for listening to F1 Every Week. Congratulations to Carlos Sainz on his first ever race victory in Formula 1, and tune in next week for a review of the Austrian Grand Prix.